Perfectionism is a virtue. It's the badge of honor worn by everyone who refuses to settle, the engine of every masterpiece ever created. At least, that's one story. The other story is that perfectionism is a gilded cage, a respectable mask for the deep, paralyzing fear of being judged. Smart, successful people exist on both sides of this line, and the consequences of their beliefs shape entire lives. Where do you stand? By the end of this, you might change your mind. The case for perfectionism is compelling. It's the force that drove Michelangelo to spend 4 years on his back, painting the Sistine Chapel, arguing with the Pope over microscopic details. It's the mindset that allows a trauma surgeon to perform a flawless 16-hour operation, where a single millimeter means the difference between life and death. This pursuit of the ideal is responsible for the crisp architecture of a skyscraper, the intricate gears of a Swiss watch, and the code that runs our global financial systems. When we look at history, we celebrate the perfectionists. We admire their refusal to accept good enough. Their high standards drag the rest of the world forward. A society without them is a society of planned obsolescence, of crumbling infrastructure and disposable art. It's a world that accepts mediocrity as the default. From this perspective, perfectionism is more than a personal preference. It's a moral imperative, a duty to create the best possible world. The standard is the standard for a reason. That sounds convincing, it feels noble. But there's a problem. What happens when the pursuit of perfection prevents anything from being finished at all? This is where the other side of the debate enters. For every Michelangelo, there are a million aspiring artists with pristine, untouched canvases. They spend months researching the perfect brand of paint, years studying classical techniques, and decades dreaming of the masterpiece they will one day create. They have a portfolio filled with potential, but they have no paintings. For them, perfectionism is a sophisticated form of procrastination. It allows them to feel productive while avoiding the single most terrifying act, starting. Starting means making something real, and real things are inherently imperfect. The writer who spends a year creating a fantasy world with detailed maps and languages, but has 0 pages of a story. The entrepreneur with a 100-page business plan, who has never spoken to a single potential customer. The home renovator who lives in a construction zone for years, unable to choose the perfect tile. They all tell themselves they are being diligent. They tell themselves they are respecting the craft. Their actions tell a different story. They are avoiding the moment of judgment. The real fear is the first draft, the first sales call, the first tile laid. The fear is doing something badly. As long as the project exists only as a perfect idea in your head, it cannot fail. Its potential is infinite. It's a Nobel-winning novel, a billion-dollar company, a design award-winning home. The moment you type the first clumsy sentence, the potential collapses into a single flawed reality. And the perfectionist cannot bear that. The endless research, the constant planning, the search for the perfect tool. These are all rituals designed to delay that moment of contact with messy reality. It's procrastination wearing a tuxedo, telling everyone it's on its way to the opera. This paints a bleak picture of paralysis, a life of unfulfilled potential. And yet, dismissing all high standards as fear seems too simplistic. Is there a difference between the perfectionism that builds cathedrals and the perfectionism that builds cages? The distinction lies in the psychological mechanism at play. The core conflict is between potential and actual. Your project as an idea is weightless and perfect. It lives in a world without friction, without budgets, without critics. Bringing it into the world means giving it weight. It means creating something that can be measured and therefore judged. The perfectionist isn't truly afraid of a typo or a flawed design. They are afraid of that final, irreversible step of making the thing real. Because a real thing can be found wanting, an idea cannot. This is why the stuck perfectionist often looks so busy. They are engaged in what psychologists call secondary behaviors. They are organizing their desk, updating their software, reading another book on the topic, taking another course. These activities feel like progress. They orbit the central task, but they never land on it. This endless preparation is a defense mechanism. It protects the ego from the painful truth that your first attempt will look nothing like the perfect version in your head. It's an elaborate strategy to keep the dream of perfection alive by never waking up. But what is this mechanism defending against? The answer is more primal than just the fear of a bad grade or a critical comment. It's defending your identity. For many, perfectionism is fused with their sense of self-worth. The thinking goes like this: if I produce excellent work, I am an excellent person. If my work is flawed, I am flawed. The project is a direct reflection of their value as a human being. This is where the trap snaps shut. If the stakes are that high, if your very identity is on the line with every project, then failure is an existential threat. It's much safer to do nothing. Doing nothing and producing a potential masterpiece allows you to maintain the identity of a genius in waiting. Actually starting the project and producing a flawed human-level first draft risks exposing you as an ordinary person who has to struggle and learn. That feeling is unbearable. This often starts in childhood. The gifted kid who is praised for being smart learns to avoid anything that doesn't come easily. The struggle itself feels like a betrayal of the smart identity. They learn that their value comes from effortless success. So when they face a truly hard problem as an adult, a problem that requires trial, error, and looking foolish, they freeze. This logic breaks down the moment you apply it to the highest performers. The Michael Jordans of the world seem to weaponize their perfectionism. They thrive on this pressure. What's the difference between them and the person frozen in their apartment, unable to start? The difference is the target of their perfectionism. Psychologists distinguish between two very different concepts: maladaptive perfectionism and healthy striving. Maladaptive perfectionism, the kind we've been describing, is driven by fear. It's focused on avoiding disapproval. Mistakes are seen as evidence of personal inadequacy. The goal is flawlessness, an impossible standard that guarantees anxiety and inaction. The person is attached to the outcome. Healthy striving, on the other hand, is driven by a desire for mastery. It's what you see in elite athletes and artists. They are also obsessed with high standards, but their focus is on the process. They get satisfaction from the act of pushing themselves. Mistakes are seen as valuable data for improvement. Their goal is excellence, which is a moving target that invites engagement. A healthy striver is in love with the climb. A maladaptive perfectionist is terrified of falling, so they never leave base camp. Imagine two software developers. The maladaptive perfectionist spends weeks rewriting a single function, trying to make it perfect and uncriticizable before showing it to anyone. They are terrified of the code review process. They delay shipping. The healthy striver, a conscientious developer, writes a good version of the function and ships it. They expect bugs. They see the feedback from the code review not as a personal attack, but as a collaborative way to make the product better. They iterate. One is focused on protecting their ego. The other is focused on improving the code. That distinction makes sense on paper, but when you're in the middle of a project and the anxiety is rising and the voice in your head is screaming that this isn't good enough, how can you tell which side you're on? You can look at your thoughts. Perfectionism is a pattern of thinking, a set of cognitive distortions that warp your perception of reality. One is all or nothing thinking. A project is either a world-changing success or a complete and utter failure. There is no in between. If you get a 98 on the exam, you focus on the 2 points you lost. This mindset makes every project a high-wire act with no safety net. Another distortion is catastrophizing. A small mistake is blown up into a prediction of total ruin. If I send this email with a typo, my boss will think I'm an idiot, I'll lose all credibility, and my career will be over. The brain treats this imagined catastrophe as a certain outcome. Of course, you'd procrastinate on sending that email. It feels like you're disarming a bomb. Then there are the should statements. I should already know how to do this. I should be able to write this perfectly the first time. These shoulds create a constant gap between your expectations and your reality. A gap that fills with shame and anxiety. These thought patterns make the act of starting feel incredibly threatening. Procrastination becomes a logical choice. It's a rational feeling response to an irrational level of perceived danger. Your brain isn't being lazy. It's trying to protect you from what it sees as a clear and present threat to your survival and social standing. The mask of high standards is just the story your conscious mind tells itself to justify this deep instinctual avoidance. The solution, then, isn't simply to try harder. That's like telling someone with a broken leg to just run faster. This reveals the most subtle trap. Some will argue you just need to lower your standards. Just accept good enough and move on. That advice can feel like a betrayal of your core values, an invitation to become mediocre. It asks you to give up the very engine you believe drives your success. But there's another perspective. A more effective approach might be to change what you are being a perfectionist about. Instead of being a perfectionist about the outcome, the flawless final product, become a perfectionist about the process. Your standard is no longer write a perfect chapter. Your new, impossibly high standard is show up and write for 1 hour every day, even if the words are garbage. Your standard is no longer build a billion-dollar company, it's make 5 sales calls before lunch. This shift is profound. It moves the locus of control from an unpredictable future outcome to a completely controllable present action. You can't control whether your book is a bestseller. You can control whether you write for an hour today. This reframes everything. You satisfy your need for high standards, but you aim it at the one thing that actually produces results. Consistent, imperfect action. You use the perfectionist's own energy to break out of the perfectionist's trap. So we have 2 paths. One says, high standards are the source of all quality, the thing that separates humanity from the animals. The other says those same standards, when misapplied, become a beautiful cage lined with velvet, built from the fear of being seen. One path leads to the Sistine Chapel, the other leads to a garage full of dusty, unfinished projects. The healthy version drives you forward into the world, hungry for feedback and growth. The toxic version keeps you frozen, endlessly polishing an idea that never sees the light of day, protecting its imaginary perfection from the messy, beautiful reality of creation. The real danger is that the toxic version feels exactly like the noble version from the inside. It whispers that you're being diligent. It tells you that you're committed to quality. It wears the mask of virtue while it quietly strangles your potential. So, here is the question. Look at the project you've been putting off. The book, the business, the conversation. The one you tell yourself you'll start when you just have more time, or when you've done a little more research. Are your high standards a shield, heroically protecting the quality of your future work? Or are they a wall, built brick by brick, to protect yourself from the messy, terrifying, and necessary judgment